Hello, my name is Roshan Sini, and I'll be analyzing the novel If He Hollers, Let Him Go by Chester Himes. The author of this novel, Chester Himes, was an African American author who was born on July 29, 1909. Many of the events that take place in this novel were experiences that Chester Himes faced throughout his life. Uh, he grew up in Jefferson, Missouri, and moved to Europe in the mid 1950s. He moved to Europe at this time to pursue his dream of becoming an author. He's most known for the genre of detective fiction, although he's done other genres as well, such as fiction and autobiographies. He explores racism a lot throughout his novels, and he would eventually die in 1984 at age 75 from Parkinson's disease. Some themes in this book include racism, anger, disrespect, power, sexualization, and revenge. Our main character, Bob Jones, experiences lots of racism in this novel from his white peers. He faces lots of disrespect, and his white superiors in the workplace uses a lot of power against him because of his skin color. A character Bob faces is a woman who just doesn't like him kind of at the beginning, but he would find out a weird thing about her at the end of the novel where she tries to sexualize him based off his color. And throughout this like poor treatment of Bob, he would have lots of anger, and he would want revenge on the white people who have done just treated him so poorly in the workplace. And he was just kind of so sick of the world that he just wanted revenge. The book starts out with Bob having some dreams of white folk just treating him poorly, and this was kind of like what he would expect throughout the novel that you'll see eventually. Bob Jones is an African American shipyard worker, and he faced racist discrimination and treatment in the workplace. His white superiors don't help Bob at all in this novel or throughout his work. Bob would get promoted in the workplace, but he would suspect that this was just because he was black, and it would give like other black workers a reason to take the job also, because they would see someone like Bob could just get promoted in the workplace from his skin color. The white superiors just don't tell Bob what to do or just help him find things, so Bob would have a lot of trouble just doing simple tasks in the workplace. He would eventually have an explosive altercation with a white worker named Mage Perkins. Bob would ask Mage, tell Mage something to do, and Mage would just call him the N-word, and he would, for no reason at all. And she said that he hoped Bob would get lynched, which really upset Bob with good reason. A blonde white man named Johnny Stoddard knocks Bob out over a gambling game. This is where Bob was just playing a gambling game with some white workers, and Bob would eventually win, but the white workers got upset, and this man would knock him out, which just shows the blatant disrespect that Bob got. Bob would fall in love with a well-educated, light-skinned woman named Alice Harrison. Alice Harrison came from a wealthy background, and she had a wealthy family where her dad was a doctor, so she kind of had high status in America at this time. She was a lighter complexion than Bob, even though they were the same race of African American. A lighter complexion just would be seen as above a darker complexion of Bob's color, which would give Alice just more respect and treatment. Alice had like different thinking towards Bob. She believed Bob should treat the white workers with respect, even though they have treated him so poorly. And Bob's kind of confused with this, but she loves Alice, so he just goes through with this. Eventually, in the book, Bob would go visit Mage because he wanted to have some revenge on Mage by raping her, because Mage treated him so poorly at the beginning of the book. But eventually, Bob would find out that Mage has some odd sexual fantasies about Bob. He would find out that Mage wants to actually have sex with Bob because she feels it will humiliate her, since Bob is a black man and she feels if she has sex with him, it would bring down her status, I guess. And so Bob is like really weirded out by this, so he would refuse to do this to Mage. But Mage tells Bob that she would accuse him of rape if he doesn't have sex with her. But Bob still refuses to do this, so Mage would accuse Bob of rape. And since Bob is a black man, he would be put to court and put to jail. So he would be found guilty of this act, even though he didn't do this. And lots of the jury during this time were white men, so they were completely biased against people like Bob who were African American. But the court would eventually offer Bob a deal that if he enlisted in the army for about 1 year, they would drop the criminal charges of Bob, and Bob would choose to do this. So this would be how the novel would end. Some historical background in this book, it was that it took place during the 1940s, and it was post World War II in Los Angeles, California. President Roosevelt was signed the Executive Order 8802, which was the prohibition of discrimination in the defense industry. This order would ban discriminatory employment practices by federal agencies and companies engaged in war-related work. And the work that Bob did in his workplace was kind of war-related because since it took place post World War II. So this order was kind of put in place for Bob's workplace. But you see how the white workers didn't really take this seriously and still discriminated against Bob because of his skin color by treating him so poorly. A kid named Emmett Till in this book was a 14-year-old African American boy who was abducted, tortured, and lynched in Mississippi at 1955. This happened to him because he was accused of offending a white woman. And eventually later on, after a couple of years, in 1955, it would be eventually found by some witnesses that he was not guilty, but the act was too late. Jim Crow laws were a big theme in this book. Jim Crow laws mandated racial segregation in all public facilities of the former Confederate States of America and in some others. So Jim Crow laws were kind of a big theme at this time for African Americans. The work conditions in the shipyard were very poor. It kind of touches on this a bit in the novel, but just not too much. But work conditions were not too good because not many rights were given to the workers, especially not African Americans. The title of this book is called If You Hollers Let 'Em Go, which is actually a poem. And I kind of sang this a lot as a kid because I didn't really know the true meaning of this, but the poem is actually racist, has racist undertones. The word tiger is actually replaced by the N-word, which shows how just racist it is. You can read it yourself, but yeah. Some analysts of this book is that Bob faces lots of anxiety and favor going to work due to the culture in America at that point in time. Throughout the book, you can see how nervous Bob is just going to work every day with the people he has to deal with, and he's just so sick of it, of this treatment and how America is at this time with his treatment. His white superiors and colleagues invoke lots of anger of Bob, and you can see this at the end of the book where Bob wants to rape Mage. Even though this is an evil act, this is just what Bob was pushed to, and it's kind of sad to see. Alice Harrison, Bob's girlfriend in the book, is African American, but is treated completely differently. And you can see how Alice's thought process of this is, with her still seeing nothing wrong with this, and even like still telling Bob that he should still treat the white workers with respect. Mae Perkins, you can see that she's a privileged white woman, and you can see how even when she accused Bob of raping her, her word was taken completely for it, even though there was no proof of this. It was just her word against Bob, which shows how white women were treated differently, just much better against Bob, who's African American. There's lots of obsession of skin color in this novel, and there's a lot of obsession of skin color at this point in time of America in the 1940s, because whites were seen as superior over African Americans. It was just a simple fact, I guess. And I feel like Cheshire Hind's purpose of this novel was to show Bob Jones as a character, how African American can face such treatment and just blatant racism and disrespect, and no one would really care about the facts. And you can see how the book ends, that Bob's taken to court and found guilty with no evidence at all of him doing this. But it would just show how African Americans were just treated with no respect at all. A vocabulary in this book, one of them being the hard R, which is a slur used against African Americans. You can see this used from lots of white peers in the book against Bob. The next word is called this. I don't really want to say it, but you can see it. It's an insult used to poor whites, and Bob uses this to Mage because he's upset with her after she insulted him. Bob would use the word white men and white folk a lot throughout the book. He would use this to describe like his workers and colleagues, which is pretty interesting because white men and white folk aren't really much descriptive words. It's just their race, but I guess it's just how much racism and skin color takes place throughout this book. In the present day, this book is relevant because it shows there's lots of violence against African Americans today, and you can see it in this video right here.
Once again in the U.S., a white police officer fatally shoots another unarmed black man.
This is a very regrettable, very sad day in our community, and we have heard several expressions of a range of emotions, and we will get through this.
Grand Rapids Police has released the controversial video of the confrontation on Wednesday. A police dashboard camera captured an unarmed officer pulling over Patrick Lioya, a 26-year-old immigrant from the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Hey, stay in the car! Stay in the car!
Lioya seems to ignore that order. The officer's body camera picks up the struggle.
The plate doesn't belong in this car.
As the officer tries to arrest him, he runs. Then
So eventually the cops would shoot the man. So that's just one of many things that happen to African Americans, even right now, especially with cops, I guess. Here's another video of a woman's just disrespect of an African American.
You called me a nigger.
I called you a nigger. You're a nigger. Nasty fucking nigger.
Okay. For Complex News, I'm Jinx. Unfortunately, we live in a world where racism is still running rampant in 2014. Just recently, there was the recorded audio of Donald Sterling making those now famous remarks. But, as we all know, racism is an everyday occurrence. Something can even pop up on a trip to the store. And for a black man taking a casual trip to the dollar store in Cheektowaga, New York, it did. The footage from a clip that's gone viral around the internet picks up after an initial incident, but it's hard to tell what. According to the cameraman's and the woman's words, it allegedly had something to do with him starting his car engine, which, according to her, frightened her children. The woman phones her husband, who's supposedly going to come handle things.
I'm bringing your father down here.
Please do.
So this was an event that happened in 2014, but you can kind of see there's many similar events like this in 2022 with people's thinking still toward African Americans, and the woman did this in front of her kids, which is kind of just not good because it affects the next generation. It can go on for like years, so yeah, it's just not good. This is my bibliography, and thank you for listening.